Prof. Sesanti, thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you for accepting our invitation and also just gracing us with your presence and helping us welcome our 2022 group. And yeah, we look forward to what you're going to deliver and share with us.
Igama likaqamata lihlala lingcwele. Igama lakhe lakuhlala lintloni ngokuba ngumdala ongajangwayo, ngokuba ngumdala ongolathwayo, sonle kunike bokhokho, sinqule kunike iminyanya sithi sithelezweni namasiko enu. Owakhe igazi lethu, thulani emithanjeni yethu, ukuxabisa okokwethu, hlaziyani ezingqondweni zethu, ukuzazi uba sisizwe dedisani ilifo elimnyama ebomini bethu, kuvele ukhanya, sinike namathongo ahlambulukileyo, ngawo sizwe impilo nethamsanqa, ngokuba amandla negunya lenu masitheni icamaku. Sicama kushokoze wasemakhoma zenza kwaqindibeza kwaququlwa wasithonga zaziwaduka namahlathi siyacamakusha. Izizwe zasematshunyeni zakwadikisa zakwasawa zakwangoma zakwamthuzumele zakwachuma siyacamakusha. Izizwe zasemanqosini zakwacosha titebonosenge abantu bomlamba besuthi sitheni icamaku. Izizwe zamachawuchi wokhawuto phaloto kophoto manobulawa ngwanyamana siyacamakusha kuzo. Izizwe zasemantani zakwasopitsho yimeme kube ncoko mazondo zitsho amaqaba wadliwa zimbuzi enqawujuluka siyacamakusha. Izwe yasemantakweni zakwatyebeni mentoka zakwadibele zakwakhangasha zakwaswelizembe siyacamakusha. Izwe yasesithathweni zakwandebe zakwachisana zakwakhupho isiyacamakusha. Izwe zasemazangweni zakwakhwalo zakwancuthu zakwamanjana zakwasobese zakwanasi zakwankume zakwamanetje zakwakhula zakwanikwanto sitheni icamaku. Kwezizwe ziwengethe izizwe kumkhulu endlokova izizwe zemqolomba. Izizwe zonke zinqule sitheni icamaku nezeqirha zasemampandleni zakwatshengwe zakwatyebe zakwakhipha zakwamandla nasiyacamakusha. Nezenza igqirhe zasematshaweni zakwatshiwe zakwakhautha zakwaphalo zakwadoka zakwaphuthumani zakwanyamana sitheni icamaku. Camakwini to all of you. Dumelang, sanibonani, habsheni. There's a very beautiful word in isiXhosa. When they greet, they say camakwini, and this word is originally from the word camaku, and the word camaku comes from the word amacam being water. And so when you say camaku, you are basically saying you are giving life to another person, because water is life. And so when we say camaku, we say camakwini. And it is the same when you say sanibonani, you are saying to another person that you recognize the other person's presence, because as African people who are not individualists, we're philosophically a people that are communal. And thank you very much, Program Director, for this opportunity, and thank you for this invitation. And I'm extending my greetings to everyone who is present. And I see in the chat box that many are saying that they are losing meaning, and that they cannot translate. Of course, you know, it is not translatable. The only thing I can say is that, you know, whether or not one speaks isiXhosa is neither here nor there. Throughout the African continent, we always invoke our ancestors in everything that we do, because we're a people that define our community or our family as those that came before us, that is our ancestors, those who are present, that is us who are living, and those that are yet to come. And it is the beautiful Ngugi wa Thiong'o who speaks about the ancestors, those who came before us, as our inspiration. And he refers to us who are living as the perspiration. And he refers to those that are yet to come as the aspiration, because there's an unbreakable link between our ancestors who serve as our inspiration and us who are working in this world, preparing for the world to come. It's a very beautiful definition of a community, because it gives us the necessary consciousness that we should always know that we do not live for ourselves, that we have a responsibility to honor those who came before us and uphold their teachings that were informed by ethical consciousness, so that we pass it on to those that are yet to come, but also the ethical consciousness in the concept of family by the ancestors who taught us this definition is that it reminds us that we must have the necessary conscience given by consciousness. That is, we must not be greedy. Those who are corrupt are doing all the evil things that they do because they do not have a sense of consciousness, because they do not have, consequently, a sense of conscience. And it is for this reason that they devour everything that is there to devour, thinking only about their stomachs and not preparing for the future. It is for this reason that we see so many amongst us being so corrupt. So our ancestors taught us all of this. But of course, what then happened was that as our ancestors were living in this process, there came a system that was imposed by the aggressors, those who came to colonize us. And more often than not, when we speak about colonialism, we do not really define it. And that is the danger, because when we speak about colonialism, sometimes we tend to conflate colonialism and colonization. It is very important for us to draw a distinction between the two, because if we fail to draw that distinction, then we fail to appreciate the position and the condition that we find ourselves in. Many amongst us say that with the achievement of the flag independence, the national anthem independence, colonialism was over. And it is here that is very necessary for us to distinguish that, colonization refers to a foreign occupation of one country by another, where one country then imposes its own national anthem on the other, begins to determine the boundaries and the borders. But then, after the struggle that was waged by our leaders, at a particular point in time, the occupying forces lowered their flags. They took away their national anthem. We had space to have our own national anthems. Some of us renamed our countries. We also had some kind of a constitution. And yet we saw that nothing changed, except that we just had a few who became prime ministers and who became presidents. And yet the reality of the matter is that these very presidents and prime ministers continue to take their orders from former colonialist powers. And this was not an accident of history. It was so because when the colonialist powers withdrew, they made sure that they would do two things through miseducation. And my emphasis is on miseducation instead of education, because education, in the true sense of the word, empowers, but miseducation misleads, miseducation disempowers. So then, what our oppressors did was that they made sure that they would give us the kind of miseducation that would make sure that one, we would work for them, so that even when we have that national anthem, that flag independence, we would not be able to do much for ourselves, because they would continue we would continue to have to be dependent upon them, because they deprived us the essential and the crucial skills. But also, you see, what they did was that they colonized us mentally. We could not see beyond the present. And so you see, that is when then we must understand what colonialism is, because colonialism, which is distinct from colonization, makes reference to the displacement of a people's culture and replacing it with the foreigners. So what happens in the process is that culture does not merely refer to the songs and the dances and the food that people eat and also what they wear. Culture also refers to people's philosophies, to the manner in which people make sense of their world, so that therefore, if the colonialists begin to take over your mind, what this means is that the colonialists do not have to be they themselves physically. Because when someone has taken hold of your mind, then you will not be able to think independently. You will not be able to do anything beyond. Anyone who has got hold of your mind does not even have to tell you what to do. You are going to do that yourself. And I had this beautiful statement. It was made by Carter G. Woodson in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And so it is for this reason then that if we understand that definition of colonialism, we will appreciate that you see the with the temporary suspension of colonialism remains. But then I've had many of our colleagues trying to make sense of this amongst us. As we have heard, some people speak about decoloniality, and so they say, whilst a particular kind of colonialism has gone, another kind has remained, which is coloniality. I do not subscribe. I do not use the term decoloniality or coloniality, because in the first place, I do not recognize that colonialism has ever been gone. Colonialism has continued to be, brutal and present in our lives. And so we do not use that, but it is helpful and useful that people should, perhaps understand that theory that is articulated by the Mignolos and the Crossfogels, which they tried to conceptualize in their own conditions, in their own realities. But those of us, I come from a particular school of thought in terms of theory and in terms of orientation. I come from an Afrocentric perspective. And by Afrocentricity, we mean that everything and anything that we engage with as African people, we measure it against our own historical and concrete experiences, and also we measure it according to our own culture as African people. As I've already said, that when we speak about culture, we're also making reference to the philosophy. And so the question that we pose to many what that we engage with, in this country, we see more often than not in the political circles people speaking about non-racialism. And the question we ask is, why do you define yourself by what you are not, that is non-racial, instead of clearly defining yourself by what you are? We therefore pose the same question there was a point in our struggle when we were engaged in what we refer to as decolonization. But the question that we raised was, then beyond decolonization, then what? Because it is not enough to oppose. It is very important to propose. And so from an Afrocentric perspective, then, we have argued that when we opposed colonialism, when we were engaged in the struggle of decolonization, we began to say that we want to re-Africanize ourselves. We want to reclaim our humanism. And so it is then that scholarship that begins to say to us, where we want to position in terms of scholarship and in terms of academia and in terms of intellectualization. We want to recognize and appreciate other worldly perspectives. But it is important as African people that we must prioritize our own thinking systems, because we have been alienated for far too long from ourselves. And so we want to understand how our ancestors, and we know that our ancestors had philosophies such as Ma'at, had philosophies such as Butu, which emphasized on the dignity of human beings. And they made sure that the economic and political systems of the African people ensured that, economically, no one would exploit, whilst those outside thinkers were dreaming of a system where there would be no exploitation of humankind by humankind, our ancestors, through the economic system of making sure that the land is neither sold nor bought, made sure that there would be no exploitation of human beings. But of course, this does not mean that there were not those who took advantage of situations and exploited them. But our ancestors consciously made sure that we would recognize the importance of justice. And this is important, the question of gender justice, because many of us in the liberation movement, whilst we were very comfortable against, we were comfortable with removing white people from power, but we were never about change. Many of us, and I'm referring particularly to males, were concerned about exchange as opposed to change. And I borrow these terms from bell hooks and Maya Angelou. And the difference between change and exchange is that when you see change, you see a displacement of one evil system, of an evil system, and replacing it with a just system. But exchange simply means, that the master steps aside and allows his stooge to step in, but continues with the same systems of oppression. And so we then say, we are not for exchange, we are for change. And it is for this reason that I truly and highly recommend that, in terms of scholarship, then we must read our sisters who are bell hooks, Ifi Amadyume, Nkirunzegu. There are many other scholars who have advanced, and Oyeronke Oyewumi, who have articulated this. And I'm reminded about this because I'm presently reading bell hooks, and bell hooks, emphasizes that those or those African males or scholars like us who claim to be committed to gender equality must make sure that we highlight and promote the scholarship of our sisters. And so I am doing that. I'm fulfilling the mandate given to me by bell hooks. But also in doing that, remind amongst us, ourselves, and those who are amongst us, that when we examine the spirituality of the African people, we will see that unlike other interpretations and articulations of understanding of spirituality that have told us that God is male and that God is our Father up in heaven, our ancestors taught us that God is beyond our imagination. But having said that, we can speak of God as our mother, we can speak of God as our father, contrary to the view that has given males a false sense of their superiority, and thinking that they and they alone were created in the image of God, and therefore, because they were created in the image of God, they've got the right to do anything and everything, and they think that they've got rights to women's bodies, and that whenever they want to have access and to enjoy women's bodies, they can do so at any time. And when women resist that, then women are going to be forced, where we are being taught that males must love their female partners, but their female partners must obey their male partners, as if, just like white people taught, they taught that they were the adult race and that African people were the child race, and that in this case males are the adult gender and that females are the child gender. And so therefore, it is in this regard that then we speak about decolonization, because our sense is that colonialism has never been gone. And it is for this reason that some philosophers have even pointed out that sometimes it is even inappropriate or inaccurate to speak about post-colonial, as you may have heard when they use the term post-colonial, because post-colonial implies and assumes that colonialism is gone. And so, our philosophers and thinkers who are African have rather chosen to put post-colonial in inverted commas, because they recognize and realize that colonialism has always been with us. So I'm very happy to be with you today. And, and I encourage you as internationalists to read all kinds of scholarships and thinkings that are there, but always make sure that you read Africa, you understand African thought, and make sure we've been told, for instance, there's this book that is highly celebrated, Paulo Ferreira's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Then I was looking at this book, it came out in 1970, I think, and yet we hardly know about Walter Rodney's book that came out in 1969, Groundings with My Brothers, a very important text, because we think that in the name of internationalization, we must know more about the global world and know nothing about Africa. And it is for this reason that we continue being a dispossessed people. I started at 1741, and it is now 1801. That was the time you gave me in terms of 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Asante sana reale buche. And I give thanks to the Creator and all the ancestors. Tamako.
Thank you, Asante Sana, Prof. Sasante. Siyabonga kakhulu for your contribution and also just the encouragement that we need to study Africa. We need to dig deeper into what has been offered to us by the different thinkers and the different people who have worked on this land to awaken us and to educate us on the thought that aims to bring, or the thought